All right. So, let's see here. We're talking about Thales, yeah? Well, you don't make a lot of money sitting around watching cows eat and poop and make milk and drawing philosophical conclusions from that definitely go against the thinking of the era. And in fact, Thales was, let me back up a little bit. He may not have come to his conclusion about water just based on things like the rivers and deltas and ice and steam and air fuels of fire. Maybe it wasn't just that, or watching cows make milk, but Aristotle, who one of the people we know about these guys from, primarily Aristotle and some from Plato, but Aristotle speculated a few things. Maybe Thales saw the birth of an animal, or maybe even of a child, a human child, and noticed that there was a lot of water-like fluid that was a part of that process. And he, from that, maybe was drawn closer and closer to the conclusion about water being the ultimate stuff of the universe. I'm sorry? Yes, well, it's primitive as the person who made it. And also he said, well, maybe even for things that are, organic, let's say like leaves or blades of grass. Maybe you notice this, you probably have as a kid, maybe you don't think about it anymore, but that if you look like a blade of grass or a leaf from a tree, that one side of the leaf has kind of a sheen to it, you know what I mean? It's kind of a shiny, and the other side's more dull. Have you ever noticed that? Petals on all the same way. So that maybe water creates that sheen, that water, well, no, maybe it does. But this is Aristotle just speculating. Maybe there's some of the things that kind of drew him towards that idea. From Aristotle, we know that Thales was, I don't want to say criticized, but he was, criticized for, because he lived in poverty, really. Like I said, you don't make a whole lot of money doing this kind of stuff. But before all of this, though, Thales had spent some time in Egypt. And in Egypt, they were advanced in a couple of areas, and one of those was astronomy, and the other one was, I guess what you would call today, meteorology, or at least weather patterns he had learned about, and the Egyptians were ahead on this thing. And so, by the way, just a commentary, a moment on meteorology. I'm not really sure meteorology is a science like chemistry or biology, because you just tell me, are you allowed to, like when you're doing an experiment in one of these lab classes, to say, well, I think there's a 50% chance that this is going to happen and 50% that it's not going to happen? Is that part of the, it seems like it's a little more absolute, isn't it, really?
There's weather that are wrong a lot. It's always 50%.
Yeah, but they leave themselves open to
well, that's no scientifically involved. Saying all of these things and saying, but I'm going to add this disclaimer that everything I just said may be wrong.
I think it may be the most human thing of all, right? But yeah. But as far as being a science, though, it seems that maybe there is some science behind it. I don't know. To me, it's more like voodoo or just guessing, really. I think, well, 50% is going to rain or it's going to clear up today. One or the other. I can do that. I don't need a degree to do that. I can
probably do just as good a job of looking at the sky.
I think so. Or just throwing darts at a board that have like different weather things on it.
Well, there was a monkey on Wall Street.
There were monkeys on it. It's true. And they did quite well, right? And the cruel inhumanity is or the end climatology of the whole thing is that they didn't share any of the money with the monkeys, though, that they rightfully earned.
Do
So
they get paid in bananas?
maybe they got paid in.
Because they don't have any use for money.
I guess
They don't know
not.
what that means.
You know what? They don't have pockets, that's why. No pockets. You know,
And
pockets.
they're
you
not
gotta
allowed
use
in
for money.
stores because they don't have
They
pants.
could have pockets. Monkeys can wear clothing.
They can wear pants. True. Sorry, that was an old Seinfeld joke about dogs, like when they're walking, they see coins, but you know why they don't pick them up? Not because they don't have opposable thumbs, because they have no pockets. That's why. But monkeys have opposable thumbs. Anyway, so, all right, so he studied this, he has some ideas, and there's one year that he predicted to himself that there was going to be a tremendous olive harvest in the region he was in, based on what he knew about weather patterns and all this. So he, with the little money that he had, he went out and he, apparently many of these olive farmers didn't own their own olive presses. They had to, they only like lease them basically whenever they needed them at harvest time. So he went out with the money he had and put like deposits down on all these olive presses around his area. And in fact, he was right. There was a tremendous olive harvest, and the farmers that needed to lease them go rushing to the olive presses are us or whatever, rent a press or whatever. And they went there and they said, oh, they're all already rented out. You're going to have to talk to Thales. He's got the deposits on all these already. So they all had to go groveling to Thales, which he did the big, great capitalistic thing. He just price gouged them, right? Just, oh, you can have an olive press, sure. Sure. Like a plumber coming out on New Year's Eve. Oh, I'll come out. Have your checkbook with you? We're going out for 500, just need to walk through the door. That's what he did today. Yeah, had fun with him. And to prove maybe that all of this wasn't completely worthless, that actually maybe it did have some value in some way. Okay. Well, in that same region of Miletus, there was another philosopher who comes later. His name is Anaximander. Don't ever name your kids these names, as intrigued as you may be. Unless you want them to become like prize fighters or MMA fighters or something. But they'll learn. I'm going to give you these dates, but just remember the 600 to 400 date I gave you earlier, but 610 to 545 BC is when he's alive. Anaximenes believes that he disagrees with Thales' conclusion about water, but he also, but he is following kind of the same basic idea, at least at first, of the elements. He says that there's too much opposition among the elements for one to give rise to the other. Let me say it one more time. There's too much opposition among the elements for one to give rise to the other three. That earth is dry, he says water is wet, air is cold, fire is hot. Yeah, how can one of these give rise to the other? And so he postulates, he also said that, back to Thales, if everything came from water, then things would have returned back to water a long time ago. We'd all be back to water again. I'm not sure he's basing that on. But he, so he looks at these elements again. And he says, since none of these he believed could give rise to the other, he postulates that there must be a fifth element. Also a good movie for souls. And Mila Jovovich. Is it two Vos? Jovovich. Fifth element, and the fifth element he calls the apeiron. Yeah, why not? Also meaning like the boundless or the eternal. The apeiron, though, is unobservable. It's at work. You just can't see it. You can at least see fire and the effects of air, at least, right? Earth, water, you can see all that stuff. We watch the videos, how the kind of damage they can do. But apeiron, though, is like the governing element. It's apeiron that keeps the other elements in check. It makes sure that day eventually becomes night, and night eventually becomes day again. That fall, slowly becomes, turns into winter, and winter then into spring again. It keeps everything else in check. It's in charge of the other elements. It holds dominion over the other elements. And although we can't see it at work, we can't see it doing these things. So it's not so much an element like the other four things, but it's more of a force among not the force, that's different. That's a whole different lecture. But a force among the other four elements. Well, when you start talking then about a fifth element that's unobservable, that's eternal and ageless and has a great amount of power to control all the building blocks of what they think is the material world, this idea of the apeiron is really nothing more than just kind of renaming the gods. This is what the gods did before. They controlled the elements. But now we're saying, we'll just give the gods a different name, basically, we'll call them what they did. And does it really matter what you call them? What matters is the authority, the power that they have, the force that they have. So apeiron really is nothing more than just the gods again. And this is important, there was a part of the Meletian school was to move away from these theocentric explanations. Remember, they wanted to give the natural world a natural explanation. But apeiron sounds much more like a spiritual explanation of things. Can't see it, can't sense it, it's been here forever, it's going on. Yeah, so this idea didn't last for too long. A fifth element. Because they're so exciting, I try to find interesting things about them, like the olive story, because I know you guys go back to that one. Anaximander is said, at least in the Western world, to be the first person to make a map. There's something of an early cartographer. And the map that he made, I've seen before. It's in a museum in Athens. Have you ever been to Greece before, by the way? Been to Greece? Let me just recommend a trip down there. It's pretty nice. Get out of Athens, go to the islands. Anyway, a map. Yeah, well, he was on a ship, and the ship sailed around. Actually, it's a map of the outer coast of the peninsula of Greece, the upper peninsula.
Make a map of like the whole area,
Of that area around Greece. A map of Greece for sailors to use. Yeah. Hey, thank you.
Hello.
Somebody would have had to draw
Yes.
the city plan.
And I've seen this map, and they present it that way. It's still, I don't know. I'm thinking it looks pretty old, but is it 600 BC old? I don't know. So it's hard to tell. But it is. It's rudimentary, but it's also accurate enough that it was useful to sailors. Another one that he was. I like to think that he was pretty close on, was that he believed the earth, though, although he was a photographer, he had some problems, he believed the earth was shaped like a cylinder. Not flat, not round, well, not completely not round, but a cylinder. I like the cylinder idea better than the flat earth idea. Sorry if there's any flat earthers here, I don't want to, I know.
Do you think they were on the flat part or the round?
No, that they're on the curvature of the thing. So that's where it has kind of some, you would actually have some reason to think that, as things kind of go over the horizon, why they disappear the way they do. But it would still mean, though, basically that you're in a flat earth as long as you don't go one of these two ways, right? I mean, if you do go one of these two ways, you would just, at least the way that I define a cylinder, But this route, though, and back and forth, you're going to have this basic kind of feel of being perhaps on a sphere of some sort, but
Is there a reason that he thought this?
observation.
When was the globe theory put out?
I do not know, actually. I do not know. When the first person, I don't know. It could be way before this, actually. It could be.
I think it's different than if he looked at the globe and then said, this is better, then that's different than
Right.
having nothing and saying.
As far as I know, and I just have a few minutes, it's been a long time since but as far as I remember, it was all based on the same idea that, about the rounded earth idea that as you see things disappear over the horizon, they don't just drop off at some point, or you can't see them forever, that they kind of slowly, so the idea of something rounded. Now, why he went for cylinder over any other kind of rounded shape, I don't know, but, or like a sphere. But this was the thinking behind it, was the same reason that maybe some people came to the conclusion about it. And that's something I don't know how flat earthers just like put aside. Oh yeah, I know that the mass of the boat just kind of slowly disappears, or not, doesn't just like drop off, or you can't see it forever. I don't know. Okay, I'll give you another one. And he was real close on this. Don't argue with me about this, okay? Don't argue, please. So this is for real. He believed, based on observation, very dangerous observation, Nick, very dangerous, that the Earth was about the same size as the sun. So that was pretty close. Kids, don't get into this business. There's no reason for you to be observing the sun for any length of time, or really any time at all. Not directly at least, but apparently Anaximander thought his eyes were going to be okay. You think so? By observation, it's all he's got. There's no telescopes or with.
My question is how big do you think the moon was?
Right.
I
have to. That's my warning. I feel like he would. He would have had. I think he had those ones like foot down, like.
Transition glasses.
Yeah, when he went outside, he looks like a weirdo. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. Transition glasses. I can't believe those are still around. They still, yes. Every time I go to the glasses, they try to offer them to me. I'm like, no. I'm going to pay the whole extra money to get another pair of prescription glasses than sunglasses. All right. Well, that's. Let's move on to the third guy that's in this group here. That's Anaximenes. Yeah, they're just observing things, doing the best they can. Anaximenes, another great name for your children. He's 580 to 500. And Anaximenes gets back to the four elements, and he believes that air is the ultimate stuff of the universe. And he believes that it's kind of in between everything. You have air and steam, and you got steam is like smoke, and wherever there's smoke, there must be, anyone know this thing? Fire. And then as you go the other way, you have mist, which is in the air. It's like water, mud, stone, or earth. Sorry, I'm writing on a funny angle here. That's mud. Yeah, so air is kind of, actually mist is maybe one of the, something between air and, but air. Air gives rise to everything else. Okay, but that's not a thing that he's really known for. Along with this, he comes up with two, I guess you would say, axioms of how they should operate from now on. And I think that probably these are still very usable kind of scientific axioms today, although you have to depend on the situation, I guess. One of them is the priority of observation, as we call this. And these are both kind of backhanded slaps at Anaximander, talking about a fifth element that should be an F. Okay, priority of observation. I can't spell the word of. It says that all things being equal, let's only discuss entities that are visible and tangible before we start coming up with things that we can't see. So all things being equal again, it's maybe more reasonable to postulate the existence of observable entities than of non-observable entities. So if you're working in a lab or something, and instead of coming up with a reason for something, you say, well, it's the invisible gremlins that make that happen. We don't accept, science probably is not going to accept that, unless you can, produce some gremlins. So based on, and of course, that's all they had, observation. So let's not come up with stuff we can't see when we still have observable entities that we can work with. The other one has to do, and this is kind of referred to as ontological simplicity. Anyone read what ontology was? In the book, maybe. It's like metaphysics. It's a branch of part of metaphysics, I guess. Of being, right? Of existing. So, figure that one out. Ontological simplicity. And this, he says, again, all things being equal, the theory which postulates the fewer number of entities is the one to be preferred. So if we have four observable, tangible entities, and you come up with a fifth one, now you just add it to the mess, and we better go back to the four based on the first axiom. But adding a fifth one, though, that gives us more things to work with. Now, again, this has some, there are times that maybe there is another element or another thing happening or another element involved that may be important. So it's just undiscovered as of yet. But when you just start adding things on, start making it more complicated, then, and I always kind of reduce this this ontological simplicity to this idea that the simplest and most reasonable answer tends to be the correct one. Or it tends to be, usually, to move you in the right direction, at least. To use a gruesome example, did you know that it's really high, I think like 85% of murders that happen in homes are committed by people who live in the home or have access to the home? Right? There's not a lot of, it happens. Not a whole lot of like break-ins with the intent of just killing somebody and then running back out again, right? It happens because people get murdered in their home because they're home and the house gets robbed, and then, then there's something ensues then. But like a murder, nothing's stolen. Just an outright murder, no other things going on, nothing's. Okay, the FBI statistics tell us 85% of these are from somebody who has access to the house, like has a key, or someone who lives in the house. So when an investigator walks into a room and there's a dead body on the floor, or even better, that chalk outline of the dead body, that's always so cool how they do that. Who does that? Is that a special job they have? I think chalk outline guy is like the lowest level of police force people, right?
It's the most important job.
It's a very important job, but it's like you give it to the rookies, like, oh, you're an intern. Oh, mini-master, really? Okay, this piece of chalk. Go draw a line around that guy. You got to get it just right. It's how his arm was, and the coroner's coming in a few minutes. Anyway, it's not. This is an imaginary discussion we're having. Anyway, so let's say everyone who has access to the house is in the room, sitting around this dead body and or chalk outline of it. And the detective knows that there's a really, really good chance that somebody in this room is the murderer. Right? So it turns into kind of an Agatha Christie novel all of a sudden.
Wait, so is
A good whodunit. Yes?
Is the stuff the people with the key are the ones that are getting killed, or the ones that are killed?
No, the person who did the murder is probably someone who has access to the house or who lives in the house. Usually someone who's not just has access, like a contractor, but who lives there. Because it has to do with also the domestic situation as well.
Yeah, but I'm guessing that counts self-defense as well. Like a attempted robbery, you know, shoot the guy, I'm done.
Yeah, I'm talking about murder as it's defined, and then, but someone who breaks into a house though, that would be a different, that would be more the exception that a murder happens that way. Then usually it's someone, that's of course assumes there's all kinds of, it appears that nothing's been stolen, nothing's been taken. That looks like a robbery gone bad. That's a different category then. But just an in-home murder. Yeah. Just your regular old-fashioned in-home murder. Well, there's a good example. But they were there to steal stuff though. Yeah.
Were they used?
Well, they hanged them pretty quickly, so. Yeah, like in cold blood. Yeah, those were complete, that's a fairly rare crime though, for people to drive out to, I've been to by that house before. I mean, that was, weird like that, What's that?
Did you take pictures of it?
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, you brought it up, did I tell you to bring this up? No? Stop it. I did not. Yeah, but think about how rare that is, that somebody drives out to I'm talking, you know how Western Kansas is, it's the middle of nowhere. There's a lot of middle of nowhere. That's the opening line of In Cold Blood. That town, what's it called? The town is, that's the opening line of the novel. It sits on top of the golden Kansas wheat fields in a place that people who live in the other part of the state simply call out there. It's a great opening line, isn't it? That's not exactly it, but.
Is it Holcomb?
Holcomb, thank you, Holcomb. Yeah, that's a great line. I feel that about Oklahoma too, right? People who live in Tulsa refer to everything west of I-35 kind of, it's out there. It doesn't matter if it's like, Tishomingo or if it's Boise City or Diamond, it's just out there. If you live in Kansas City, Kansas, or Topeka, or Wichita, even, you would just say, out there.
I feel like every time I watch the news, they have the weather and stuff, and I would just see like a new county or town. I'm like, what? Like that exists. It's just
Right. It exists.
It's Coffeeville.
Yeah, there's South Coffeeville. South Coffeeville's in Oklahoma. It's its own town. You go to Nowata and just keep going, and then you get South Coffeeville, but then you go over the border into Kansas and you're in the metropolis of Coffeeville. South Coffeeville is where all the rich Coffeevillians live, I think. I'm kidding. I have no idea what it looks like. I've really driven through it, but all right. Okay, so I don't know, that maybe not the best example, but the most reasonable answer is that somebody here in the house did this. And statistically they know that as well. That helps also with and so they're gonna eliminate all these people in the house before they kind of widen the circle out to the next, what about other people they knew? What about enemies that they had? What about people who, because that's where the next statistic leads to, the next most reasonable thing. I just watched the thing, I'm sorry to be so morbid today. I just watched a thing, actually it was recorded, this poor girl, before you guys were alive, that little, what was she, 5, 7-year-old little, John Benet Ramsey. Right, and so, but what the police did the same thing, because that's just the way that they work. They have to eliminate the family or the people in the house first. That's usually how this goes. And it wasn't until another detective found that there was a window that had been broken going into the basement, and found that it's possible to slip somebody in that broken window, but the regular police had Boulder hadn't had a murder in like 10 or 12 years or so. It was a relatively safe town, and that's pretty safe. And so they didn't really have any seasoned detectives on there. And plus it was like a day after Christmas, so all the the good ones were all, what do people in Colorado do? To the mountains? What do they do? staycation.
Become a hermit.
Gonna go to Vegas, gonna go skiing. Yeah, maybe the beach, right? Yeah, maybe they go to the ocean. But they were all at home, they were all, it was the 26th of December, they're all snuggled in their beds. And, the new pajamas and hot cocoa ready to make in the morning. And they get the call, oh my God. But they had, finally, it took them a long time, but it took me a long time. I kind of started to feel sorry for the family. A long time to exempt them from there's a better word for that. To clear them, I guess, not pardon, but like exonerate, so say, okay, they're not a part of they're not under that's where they see it. In that case, they said, they're no longer under the umbrella of suspicion. I know that was a good deal. But then they started widening it out. Well, who else had access to the home? Well, they had contractors that had come and go, and they had a big party the night before. So maybe somebody could have disappeared and slipped down and hidden somewhere and stayed. That's what they went there. That's just the most reasonable way to go. This whole thing, if you know, this other, I guess you call it axiom, one of those you call Occam's razor, this idea of Occam's razor, that it's the general, kind of the same thing, really. I mean, in a way, that who can tell me what it says exactly? You know,
I don't know exactly.
yeah, it's really almost the same. It's like the simplest, most reasonable explanation tends to be the correct one.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's always the correct one. Say again.
Occam's razor.
Yeah.
I think it's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm probably simplifying it. Yeah. But, yeah. And so and that comes, I think William of Ockham lived, I don't know, 1300s or something like that. So this is much later after this, but all right. Well, okay, air, but he's most known for these two kind of basic, we'll just call them scientific principles, at least scientific for their time. Okay, well, I only have one cool thing about him. He believed that the earth was shaped like a disc. I don't know, don't ask me. I don't have insight into this. Yeah, it's basically flat. We did have, one time I taught this, a couple of years we had a ultimate frisbee golf team, I think. I actually competed against other schools. It was somewhat organized. I think it was in Tulsa Park Service or something. And they put that on their t-shirts, the quote from Anaximenes. They actually found the actual quote and put on their t-shirts, which, just made them look more snobby than they were. Just maybe Central want to beat them harder, it's just,
Were they any good?
I don't know. I think so. I think they had fun, I think they just had fun.
East Central Frisbee golf team.
Yeah, well, I mean, everyone knows that East Central's a powerhouse in frisbee golf. Or also known as Frolf. Frolf.
Did they recruit maybe?
Well, we don't use that R word around here. We're not allowed. No one's recruiting anybody for frisbee golf or any other sport. I had to get on to people recruiting for bowling. So, Out milling around the middle school leagues. Hey, let me give you a card, someone to call. All right. What time is it? 51? Well, I'm gonna talk to this in a second. I'm not gonna talk to the next person. Is somebody you already know, but someone you may not have known is a pre-Socratic philosopher. You know him for other reasons, and as the late, great radio announcer Paul Harvey used to say, now you will learn the rest of the story. Because you probably hated this guy already, now you'll just think you have a good reason for hating him. His name is one that I feared to write on the board, Pythagoras. The Pythagoras, not the other one, the Pythagoras. Huh? Yeah, all right. Well, Pythagoras, I'll just say a couple things, I'll stop. In addition to having a school of mathematics, the people that worked for him that did this He also was a cult leader. By any definition, he was a cult leader. His cult had to move around a lot because they get ran off by the locals. Yeah, they didn't like them. Talk about that. And eventually they end up settling somewhere more remote, far south of Italy, and where they continue to carry on with their cult and their ideas and also their school of mathematics as well. So I'll leave it at that. You guys, I know, it's like a season ender, right? Yeah, it's like the last episode of the first season of Breaking Bad. It's that. I bet you had to wait like 6 months for it. All right, we'll stop there. My friend Pythagoras. Not my friend. He caused me much trouble. Triangles. Can't think of all the times I've encountered triangles in real life. Outside the class.